Hey everybody, welcome back to 18 Outdoors. And right now we got Mr. Bo Martonic. And if y'all don't know who he is, he's the owner and operator of East versus West, or East meets West.
Yeah.
East meets West podcast. How you come up with something like that? I can't even say it.
It's a tongue twister.
Tongue twister. Also, part owner of Timber Ninja.
Yes.
So, sweet. Y'all fixing to get all that fire back up.
Yep, this
Looking
summer.
forward to that this summer. Sweet. So that kind of got messed up in the hurricane, you just tell me. So, wow. So anyway, this guy, how old are you?
33. He just turned 33 last week.
And all he does is hunt and do hunting stories. I mean, podcasts. Everything you do is all about hunting. No daggone manual labor. Just enjoying outdoors.
Not anymore. No.
That's a daggone awesome thing. So, if y'all care, give us like a highlight from. I know your dad. You and your dad. I mean, y'all are like hunting buddies. I mean, just been doing it. So, give a little background into that, and then we'll get into some of the stories of these 3 real instrumental deer to you. I guess very important deer. So, tell them stories. So, go ahead and just give us a little highlight how you started.
Yeah. So honestly, I had no choice other than to get into hunting. Like my whole family, from my grandfathers on both sides of my mom's side and my dad's side, hunted, loved hunting, and that passed down to like my father, my uncles, everybody. I mean, it was just like it was ingrained in them. So growing up, my dad and my grandpa, big bow hunters, gun hunters, whatever it was in season, loved it. Spring gobbler hunting, everything. And that's really how I got started, was because of them. I'm very, very lucky to have mentors that, one, were skilled at hunting and was willing to spend time with me to help me learn quicker than most would be able to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you killed your first one?
I was 12 years old. It was the first deer that I shot with a rifle. I was 12 years old. That was the legal age then. Now you can hunt younger in Pennsylvania, but at that time, so I was 12 years old, first time out when I actually had a gun in my hand, and I was sitting in a double ladder stand with my dad, and we were sitting over this old gas line, and there were some clear cuts around, and I remember he had me all set up. He had a skirt around the front and a Mr. Buddy heater there to keep me warm. I looked like the Michelin Man. I was all bundled up in clothes, and I remember the spike walks out. It was opening day of rifle season, and I looked through the scope. I said, "Dad, he's not big enough." He goes, "Yes, he is." He goes, he's like, "You haven't earned the opportunity yet to be looking for big bucks. Like, you got to earn your stripes." And so I shot that spike, and I was so tickled pink. I was happy that I had the opportunity to be able to do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Even if Dad even let you start out with your own, just like I said, get that trigger.
Yeah.
You know, get it going, get it started. That give you the fire, and then now you haven't shot a spike since, have you? Been 8 points bigger.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that, but I went to an 8-point next, and then I went back to a 4-point, and then it started getting a little better after that.
Sweet, man, that's awesome. And again, you're a Pennsylvania hunter, so up in the mountains all the time. So sweet. And now, crap, you're going everywhere hunting. So even branching off into elk, and you've been to Alaska.
Yep.
So
you and I talk about that a lot. I love hunting all over.
I'm surprised you didn't move up there, being your age.
I know. My grandfather lived up there for a while. He was a forest jumper in Alaska, and he always tells me stories about it. And lately, I've been able to review some old film that he had, and we were able to digitize it to put it on a computer and watch it. It's so cool to be able to see that.
Alaska, man, that's next level. I mean, if I was a young cat, old rat man, heard that to move up there. I don't care what you said. There's some adventures up there to be had. A young guy, boy, he better get it while he can.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, we got these 3 big daggone deer back here. So go ahead and pick out which one you're going to start with, and just tell some of these stories. Because, again, very, very nice stuff. And just, let's see what we got here.
Well, so first of all, you'd wanted to come to my house and go through and look at all the deer heads and stuff, and then I was like, I said, I'm in a little bit of a pickle where I've got a lot of stuff going on. I have a small house, and honestly, I don't have a nice trophy room. I've got a few bucks here, a few there. Like this one, it was in the basement on top of boxes. My whole goal in life is to end up building
on the box in the basement.
I want to build a place where I can have it. That's my goal in life, is to do that. Simple to the point, a place enough to put my deer heads that I can sit there and look like like we have here at Johnny's place. But
it'll happen.
But anyways, so when you were saying that, I said I'm gonna pick out 3 that are pretty special to me to bring and be able to talk about. And the first one is this one here in the center down low. That was my first archery buck. So I was 17 years old and I was a senior in high school, and I'd been archery hunting for a few years. I'd missed a handful of bucks up until that point, and everyone always told me when I was, especially at that age, they're like, Bo is the luckiest hunter ever. He gets so many opportunities. And I was just like, my dad had kind of kicked me out of the nest at that point. It was like, go. And I was just loving it.
Kicked him out.
Scouting and I'd get these, I was hunting off the ground. I was hunting from a climber and tree stands, and I couldn't hold it together to save my life. And but anyways, yeah, bad. And this spot that I'd found was my uncle had shot a buck, and he had called me to come help him drag it. And I remember he told me where he's parked at, and he said, follow the creek up and you'll run into me at some point. So okay, I parked. Well, I didn't know he meant this little tiny feeder stream that went up the hill. I went down to the main creek and I crossed it, and it was like up over my knees, and I get over there and I hit this old grade, this old logging road that ran up the side of it, and I just started hiking. I was going the completely wrong direction, but I started finding all these big scrapes and all this sign and everything. So once I realized I went the wrong way, came back, he'd already drugged the buck to the truck. I was like, there's some good sign over there. He's like, yeah, no, nobody goes over there because you need waders for the most part. I was, so going across. And so I ended up hunting over there. And it was the last day of archery season that just before dark, and actually my dad he had just tagged out, and he came to sit in a tree behind me. He took a separate climber and went up about 10 feet behind me just to watch. Wow. And I heard a buck grunting down below me. I was about a quarter of the way up the hillside on this little bench, and there's some trails coming from the bottom. And I heard a buck making a scrape and heard a grunt, and I just got on the tube, and he just let out a deep growl and came running up. 20 minutes before legal shooting light ended, and I shot him at 22 yards, and it was like, I couldn't have made a better shot again in my life. And when I shot, I was just like, oh my, I hit him. I did it,
Did it.
And ended up being a 9.5-year-old deer. Wow. Is what it was aged at. He's only about 13 or 14 inches wide, but heavy, dark antlered rack. And ended up finding out that had a trail camera picture of him from the year before 6 miles away.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool.
Now you feel like up here they do that more. The South it does happen to an extent, but you think they travel more up here?
I think yes, I think it's really individually on the bucks, but I think especially at that time the deer population was super low. So I think it was November 14th or 15th at that point, maybe having to go searching for some more does. Yeah. The population's come up enough. I don't think some of the older deer really need to go as far during the rut. I think they're all individuals, but yeah. I don't feel like I've seen it as much as I did 15 years ago.
Okay, oh, cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice buck. Especially they go first with a bow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome. So.
Yeah, it took a lot. It took a while to top that again.
You still beat me by a long shot. Got 17 years old.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then the one that's up here on the right hand side, that one's my biggest one to date. As 2020, yeah, 155 and some change, maybe 156, I can't remember, is a 9-point. And wow. 8.5-year-old deer. That one was because of our mutual buddy over here, Johnny Stewart. Him and I were sitting in a deer camp with my dad and a few of us, and having a couple beverages at night, kind of like we both have tags in our pocket and not sure what to do. And Johnny says, we're all hunting by ourselves. He's like, why don't we get together and go out? And my dad had tagged out. He's like, Joe, why don't you do some wind bump drives to us? Just one person kind of going through some spots we'd set up and just blow wind in there and see if we can get some things out. And Johnny's like, I got a good spot. He's like, on some side hills and some points where I know it was a Saturday, so there was a bunch of people out and there was trucks everywhere, but they were all on the tops of the hill, not down on those steep faces. And the access was from the top. And we went in, and Johnny kept talking about this big 9 point that was, he goes, I think he's living there. I haven't had a picture of him in months, but I think he's there somewhere. And we went down and sat, and he sat towards just over the edge of the ridge where he had some pictures of him in late season a few years back. And I went about halfway down the hill, just this little tiny bench, and I sat relatively close to where these hemlocks were, where it was kind of thick bedding on this point, and there was wide open oaks. And I was just like, oh, big buck's not gonna just, even if he's pushed, he's not gonna run across this wide open. Yeah. And so got set up pretty close to it, and towards the end of the drive, it was going on. We were sitting there for well over an hour, and I could all of a sudden I saw some brown, and I look, and I just saw it rack. I mean, he's only 20 yards away at this point, and I pull up my gun, and it's like, oh my gosh. And he's looking behind him, trying to figure out how to circle back, because he knew, he could hear my dad coming through or smelling him, and he's like, he's there somewhere. And I put it right on his chest, and I shot him and dropped it. I was just like, I could not believe it. And wow. I called Johnny. I think I called him because I had just a little bit of service. I said, I shot a huge deer. He goes, is it the big 9 point? I said, oh yeah. And but the best part about that story was, so we got together, and what was cool is, I was in a spot that was, an area that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't put in the work for that area or anything. Johnny, had found the deer in the spot and everything. And he was just as happy for me as if he shot the deer, which I thought was cool. And then we, this is where he screwed me then. I think this was like kind of, jabbing. He says, I said, let's quarter him up and pack him out. I said, that's going to be a drag up over this hill. And he goes, no, he's like, we want that whole deer back at camp. And I said, okay. He goes, we can go down across the creek in the bottom. And I said, that's pretty much a river if I remember right. He's like, nah, it's not too bad. He's like, me and your dad will go get the truck. We'll drive around. You drag him down there. We'll meet you down at the bottom. I get down there, and that sucker was wide. I don't know how 120 feet across, something like that, and deep. And I had one set of waders in the truck that he threw on. They ended up leaking. So he comes across to help me. I took that deer and I tied it with paracord to my belt loop because it was flowing pretty good. I said, he goes, you're gonna sink. I said, if that deer goes down, I'm going down with it. I'm not losing them. And so it was really cool to drag that across and then get it back up to camp and have everyone come in and celebrate it and be able to see it.
So you think he punished you a little bit with that?
A little bit.
Done that on purpose? A little bit. See you get wet.
Yeah, he wanted to see you get a little wet. Freezing cold, snow on the ground.
Wow. So that's pretty awesome. A one-man drive, basically. So
yep.
Sweet. And that worked out perfect.
Yeah.
And you could have shot him with a bow, probably, right?
Yeah, I could have.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Again, a very, very big buck. So.
Yeah.
And it's cool how their hair is different than down there. It's not quite as thick as like John was talking about that North Dakota buck, but crap, that's way thicker than our deer.
Yeah.
So, what do you think he weighed?
Oh, I don't even know, to be honest. Honestly, the body wasn't very big on him.
Wow.
It was.
Right.
Yeah. And for being an old deer like that, I don't know if he was wore down from the rut or what, but he just didn't have a huge body on him.
Still very, very, very nice buck.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what's the story with this cool looking dude?
So this was in 2021. This was an opening day of archery season, October 3rd.
Wow.
Buck, and I'd never shot one opening day prior to that. I'd found this guy's matching set of shed antlers that spring.
Wow.
And I was like, that's a really, really good deer. And I was going, and I'd never have said this before, having this much confidence in opening day, but I had a lot of confidence going into it. And I didn't really know. I thought I knew where the buck was bedding. After shooting him, I learned I probably didn't, but it didn't matter. It was one of those situations where there was a newer logging cut they had cut the year before, and there was also some oak trees that they left in there that had some acorns on it. So I was like, all right. And the rest of the area didn't have any oak trees. So I was like, they're going to be feeding, or I thought, he's feeding there at night. And I had some trail cameras in there, and from previous years' data, I noticed he just used this one trail in this creek bottom, and he was coming out of that, dropping down and heading somewhere. I thought he was bedding out on this point. it actually looked like he was bedding down lower after I shot him. I think he went back to where he was bedding at. But
wow.
anyways, it was cold, like 20-degree temperature drop for that morning. I mean, it was like in the low 40s, upper 30s for opening day. That was cold, and so that's why I had a lot of confidence in it. I didn't have any cell cameras in there, and I didn't have any real-time intel that told me he was going to be there. It was just looking at the path and just the weather and everything just lined up. And there was a spot it was a couple mile hike in from the road. I went up this creek, and I got up in, and I used the water and hopped up on the bank, and my tree was right on the bank of the water. I mean, the stream wasn't very big. It was probably 8 foot wide, something like that. But it was enough to pull your thermals down. But if you go on the flat in front of it where the deer trail was, you'd almost kind of get a normal wind. It was going like the opposite direction. So it'd be like kind of 1/4 where those deer would be coming from. And I learned that by dropping milkweed when I was in there in September. And I was like, yeah, I looked at the historical trail camera data, and southwest winds, when I look back, it seemed like that's when that deer would use that trail. And we had a southwest wind and everything just seemed right. But I was like, how can I hunt this? Because he had everything in his favor. So that's when I walked over to the creek bank and I dropped the milkweed, and it just fell into the water. And you walk 10 feet this way, it'd blow that way.
Wow.
So I climbed that tree right on the water there. And I mean, it wasn't first light. It was probably 9 o'clock in the morning. He was coming back down through there. And the bad part about it is I missed him at 14 yards. No. And he bounded out further, and that's where I ended up shooting him out further with my second arrow. Was the one that I killed him with.
Wow.
But it was so cool to see. And it's funny because you look at this deer, and I guessed him when I shot him, even the trail cameras, I figured he was high 130s, something like that. And he ended up taping out at 147.
Wow.
And
you got long beams and tall tines.
Yeah. And we scored him.
Spread too.
we scored him 3 different times because I was like, I don't believe it. And then when we had the shed, I had the sheds too, and those would have taped out about 135 from the year before. Wow. And so he put on about 12 inches, but just such a cool deer and opening day.
Oh yeah. I've never done that, not with a buck. So.
No, I just could not believe it. And that's still my biggest archery in Pennsylvania to date. So.
Well, that's very nice. So key thing is you with milkweed going into the spot and kind of testing.
Yep.
So I was actually messing with a guy last night, and he was showing me a bunch of pictures he got from deer crossing the creek, and he was asking, kind of trying to figure out position where he wants to hunt. Because I'm talking about he's got bucks and does just crossing, and I said you might want to slip in, sometime and just test it with milkweed and see, because you might need to be like you on the water. Then again, depending on where they're going, if you got them figured out going to bed or whatever, you might want to be higher where the sun hits it, and it might go up straight as soon as the sun gets up. It just depends. All that's situational. So, but you got to get in there. It's very nice if you went in there and tested that out, because 10-foot difference.
Yeah.
So.
And it's taught me a lot. I mean, the next year during the rut, I had hunted a spot. I was right on the creek bank again, same type of scenario. I was in the bottom of a thermal hub, and a buck came in, same thing. Wind was blowing to him this way where I was at, was falling down behind me, and shot him there in the evening the next year. Same type of scenario, different area, but same type of setup. So I use milkweed to test that stuff a lot, because you can manipulate.
Keep some milkweed and use it.
Yeah, you can manipulate an area, just by moving around a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, even like you're hunting a place, and it gets later on in the day, and you do a test, and it gets questionable, you can always just move. Especially with today's equipment, you can move pretty quick. So key advice there. So now, I mean, 3 awesome bucks. So what do you think, kind of one specific thing that puts all them in the same kind of element as far as the way you hunt or whatever? So.
Well, I'd say This one's a little bit of the anomaly, other than the fact that
drive stuff.
Yeah, with the drive, but I'd say
with the terrain maybe.
Yeah, so with both of these two, and honestly, a lot of the deer I've shot are in bottoms, in creek bottoms, in lower elevation spots where a lot of people say you can't hunt because of the wind. And I mean, it takes certain conditions, calm. If it's super high winds, it swirls like crazy in there. But for the right conditions and stuff, I love hunting the bottoms. And a lot of my stuff is centralized around scrapes in those bottoms.
Oh, really? Wow. Now, that makes me nervous where I hunt at some of them tight quarter bottoms, like they swirly wind, so I kind of try to stay away or up somewhere. So
I want to caveat that a little bit. They're not tight bottoms either.
Or wider bottoms?
A little bit wider bottoms. Tight bottoms, I've struck out. I've tried hunting those, and I've learned to get higher in those types of scenarios. And when the bottom is wide enough, it's calm. If there's like a little opening there, sometimes you hunt right over those little openings. You just get the straight uphill thermal rise of hunting over those openings. It's just testing some of those places. But to me, especially when it comes to hunting the rut, this one was an anomaly. Of typically in early season, I'm not down low like that. That's normally kind of a rut setup. It was just situational of what I was doing.
Well, sometime in the south, same thing. Early season, it's hot. They do a lot of lower stuff. So, so you're up hot, up high, and hot stuff. So.
But I love super cold, calm mornings for those bottoms. Like frosty mornings, calm. It's like you can predict things a little bit better. I hunt a lot around like beaver ponds and stuff in those bottoms, and I'll get on like that, say the upper end of it. So you have a crossing there, and you got trails that are coming this way, good funnel. But as that wind's coming down the valley, and then it hits that beaver pond where that body of water is typically warmer than what the air is on those cold mornings, and just lifts up. Wow. So like I feel like I'm in a bulletproof setup. It just goes and.
Wow. So you're setting up above the beaver pond, closer to the dam, though.
Yep.
So that water. All right, sweet. That's good information there. So, because we hunt some beaver, or I got a couple areas where I hunt at some beaver pond stuff, or beaver pond or beaver access, beaver pond. So, also the habitat that beavers create too.
Yeah.
So it helps. The sprouts where they chew the trees down and stump sprout stuff. I was talking to a guy about that a couple weeks ago. That beaver areas, they create so much habitat chewing trees down, and stump sprouts come up, and deer love that fresh growth. So, let alone all the other stuff, the fall down and stuff that creates. So, wow. So again, that stuff right there is showing up.
Yeah, that's.
But that you can't beat that neither. So.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I have these two in my living room. Those ones.
That's the main two.
Yeah, those are the main two I like looking at. I've got some other ones that I have in the office, and like I said, in the basement. But I have two main ones, and then caribou and the elk in the living room. That's about all the room I got for them there.
That's awesome. All right, your grunt call. I heard you talk about that. Of course, I heard Johnny talking about it. What's your strategy on a grunt call?
Okay, so I love calling. I'm a heavy caller when it comes to around the rut, which is I think the opposite of the way Johnny is, if I remember right. So I blind grunt a lot, especially like October 27th, 28th, somewhere in that range through the rut. But just my thought process, and I learned this from my dad, but was I can only see in a lot of these places 30, maybe 40 yards, but most of the shots are even closer. And I'm thinking if a buck's cruising and he's just out of range, I'm not gonna be able to see him. I'm not gonna be able to hear him. By calling and going through that, they are rarely gonna be able to circle downwind to me, or sometimes you can get busted with that, but that just gives me that extra ability to do so. So every 15, 20 minutes, I'll do some calling, and once it's really into the rut and you're seeing chasing and stuff, I'll dump the bleak can a couple times, and then brr, 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 brr. And if I see a buck and he's moving away from me, I kind of start soft, and then I work my way up to deeper tones to try to pull him in, try to figure out his temperament, look at his body language. There was one I didn't bring that I have mounted where it was a situation where I was doing that, and I saw him coming with his hair standing up on the back of his neck, and that was like,
wow.
He was ready. It's like, you know, a gobbler that's just ready to come in. Like that's how I felt about that situation.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Wow. So the early season, what type of grunts are you doing? Just a social, just a meh, or just?
I'm not really grunting in early October.
So you're waiting for closer to Halloween. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what kind of grunt is that? Just...
That's either the kind of the tending type grunt, like the as I'm going through, or just kind of a couple sequences that just softer, and it kind of gets deeper as I go through.
Okay. Are you tying that in with the area that you're hunting was scrapes or rubs or?
Yeah, I mean most of the places that I'm hunting are typically in and around scrapes and or funnels. Usually they kind of coincide with each other as far as those places, and even on the side, and even those funnels, whether that's in a creek bottom or that's on the edge of doe bedding. The last few years, again, I think I was saying a little bit earlier, but I feel like the deer population has come up a little bit more, and it seems like sometimes hunting some of those funnels just that are good funnels weren't working as well for me as finding or hunting specific doe groups that I've learned either through personal experience or through trail camera data of when those areas does start to come into heat, and I'll hunt specifically around those doe bedding areas and then hunt those spots specifically.
Well, and then of course, now the scrape in that situation, how do you prefer the scrapes? You know, of course, the doe bedding, is it lower or higher? Or how, I mean, where are these scrapes positioned? Are they, and also are they the big ones?
Yeah, so where they're positioned at really depends on where it's at. As far as I used to try to make a lot of mock scrapes. I don't really anymore. Kind of hunting them how the scrapes are, and I guess I should say I'm not always hunting right over top of that scrape. But there's always one major one in the area. I shouldn't say always, but a lot of the times, the majority of the time, there's one in the area. And I'm looking for the community scrapes that are historical, multiple licking branches, broke off, and areas like that. Like the one area I was hunting last year, I was hunting a really big deer on, and I learned from the year before of once, you know, he'd hit it maybe once or twice in daylight in October, like towards the end of October, and once you missed that window, he didn't leave the area. I always thought he left because I didn't get him on camera or anything there, but he was just not hitting the scrape, but he was skirting it. He could still smell it. So I ended up moving my setup last year and had an opportunity at him. I misjudged the yardage and I missed him, but I was about 60 yards away from the actual scrape per se, but I still think that's a part of the strategy for me.
So you're trying to tie in a big community scrape with a associated doe bedding.
Yep. And
that's never into a certain position like with the doe bedding. So you think? I mean,
I don't know. I guess I hadn't really thought about it much. I mean, as far as I'm typically trying to hunt on the downwind side of where that doe bedding would be, thinking they're going to cruise on that edge of it. Sometimes the scrape isn't always, you know, it might be on, say, the south side of it, but there's not one on the north side of it when you have a south wind. So
you're not worried about shooting to the scrape. You just,
no.
More like he's downwind of it, checking it anyway, so you don't really worry about that part.
That would be great if, the end of October, I focus on, or really middle of October through the end of October, I focus on that a little bit heavier than. But then once the rut comes, I like having them in the area. They still do check them. It's just not, from my experience, I don't put as much weight on being able to shoot to the scrape.
But once, say, Halloween hits, that's what you're concentrating on is doe bedding. Mm-hmm. You're timing that with trail camera pictures and dates, you know, coinciding with bucks going to it that you're getting on camera and stuff. And then how long are you gonna stick with that? So, do you shoot one or until a month or?
Yeah, as far as the scrapes around doe bedding there.
Yeah, that strategy. Like, when do you have to change? You know, like getting outside of that if you haven't harvested one. So.
About November 3rd, 4th, around that time, then I'm switching to more of some of those tight funnels, because at that point it's like all the does are kind of coming into heat, trying to find those spots where I can get in there, whether that be the top of a ditch that's coming up and having a flat that come. The more features I can put together, whether it's vegetation or terrain, where things meet together, that's when I kind of transition to those traditional funnels in between doe bedding spots is kind of how I look at it.
Wow. And that's the first week in November? Good.
Yeah.
Wow. Good deal. All right, so last question.
Yes.
What in the world, besides the grunt call, I already figured out that, what do you got to have in your backpack? What do you got, when you get out of the truck, you make sure it's in there when you go?
Food.
Or your family? Food.
Food, lots of food.
You eat in the tree?
I do. I'm a heavy eater in the tree because, like, when it comes to if I'm gonna sit all day, for me, and to be able to do that day after day, that's something I look forward to, and I set times on when I'll eat each of the snacks that are in there. So it gives me these short goals to be able to hit, and then to be able to be patient with it, because I've learned when I started becoming, seeing all this stuff about being super mobile and moving around all the time, my success went down when I went back to the way I was hunting before, sitting multiple days in spots. That's when I did the best, and to keep my mind in it and be patient.
Hurt some people's heart for that now.
Yeah, I know.
But that's basically the kind of style I do. I'll spend some time in places, the right places. So.
Yeah.
So all right, go ahead and lay it out. Now you got this stuff where you go out, start. What you got first? What you eating first? Little Debbie or a Christmas tree or what?
Oh no,
You already got them took out of noisy wrappers and put them in something?
Yeah, I put them in a
Ziploc
bag, yeah. And actually I'm going to start with my sandwiches. I need to have a hard plastic container. The peanut butter and jelly's in the bags. I'm sick of my hands getting covered in jelly, and that's not good for scent. So that's going to be a change I have. But typically I'm starting with like a protein bar or something in the morning. That's what I'm going to have. And then I'll have like some trail mix, something like that throughout the day, maybe some jerky. And then around noon, about 11:30 is when I typically go to the sandwich and an apple.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah,
gotta have that. That's the number one.
That, yeah, either that or ham and cheese. That's the other option. And then I'll move, and then there's a lull kind of in the afternoon. Then I'll mix some caffeine in a drink, get myself keep.
Lull like you actually fell asleep and then wake up. I better drink my coffee.
Yeah. Well, I've learned, because the reason why I don't do exactly noon anymore is I've shot multiple deer at noon, like right at that time. So I'm very superstitious on not messing around noon. Like I want to be alert then. Usually then like 1 to 3 I can kind of let my guard down a little bit and then pick myself back up. I don't eat as much in the afternoon. It's like the mornings for some reason are the times that I need to get through. I'm usually done with my food about 1 or 2 o'clock.
Well, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you. I appreciate it, Bo.
Yeah, thank you.
That's some awesome bugs. Again, appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Thank y'all for watching the videos. Well, again, we appreciate y'all's support. If you haven't liked, please like and subscribe. And don't care if you haven't got one of our books, check out Amazon and get a book. Also, we got a link on there where you can, on our YouTube channel, where you can go on. We got a little store set up. Like if you're interested in any kind of merchandise, shirts and stuff, you can check that out. And we really appreciate anything like that. So, again, we appreciate y'all's support. Keep watching. We're going to keep trying to share the outdoors and how we do things and try to help everybody that we can enjoy the outdoors. And, we do this for just basically because of the environment and the community that's involved and built around hunting. So again, we appreciate y'all. Like, share, and we'll see y'all again.